Welcome to Om Times TV, a division of Om Times Media and Broadcasting. Welcome to What is Going Om, for new thought from the edge of Om. Each week on Om Times flagship radio show, veteran broadcaster, author, and media consultant Sandy Sedgbeer conducts thought-provoking interviews with inspirational authors, artists, musicians, scientists, speakers, and filmmakers who are working at the point where spirituality and science meet consciousness at the very edge of Om. Here is your host, Sandy Sedgbeer.
Hello, welcome. Back in 2018, I introduced a show with today's guests by posing the questions: can quantum technology raise our consciousness, diminish pain, lift depression, improve sleep, harmonize our environment, and mitigate the effects of EMFs and more? It sounded like futuristic science, but according to thousands of people around the world, focused life force energy, a quantum technology that is not in any way visible to the human eye, was doing just that. Technology is changing our world faster than many of us can keep pace with, and in ways our parents could never have imagined. Time was when how we lived took decades to change, and few people would have put their faith in something they could not see. But in a technology-driven world, a lot can and has happened in just 5 years. So joining me today to share the results of the last 5 years of continuing research and development are the founders of Focused Life Force Energy, Clayten Stedmann and Stegman. If quantum technology and its role in health, well-being and healing is something that interests you, stay tuned, because we'll tell you later how you can participate in a 15-day no-obligation free trial. And get this, at some point during this show, Jeff and Clayten will activate a high consciousness field that will remain on this recording. So pay attention and see if you can feel the difference when that's turned on. Jeffrey Stegman, Clayten Stedmann, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Great to be here with you, Sandy.
Good to see you both.
Yeah, good to see you again.
So before we catch up on your latest research and development, just for those who may be new to the show, give us a really brief 1 minute, if you can, outline of what Focused Life Force Energy is and what inspired you both to make this your life's purpose.
Well, Focused Life Force Energy is a service activating a high consciousness field at a home or around a cell phone or an object or a business. And a high consciousness field we experience out in the world kind of rarely, but like in a place of worship where there's loving worship, like for decades and decades. Places that might be called pilgrimage spots where people go for miracles and cures. So a high consciousness field is just an elevated consciousness area that has all sorts of benefits to it.
Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you. Continue.
Yeah, and Clayten introduced me to some inventor that was working on this high consciousness field technology, maybe a consciousness technology, and together we saw the potential of it, and we did service work with the technology, raising consciousness around the world during 2012, and then we started the FLFE business. So the ability to raise consciousness and to assist others to live their best life, that's been my inspiration.
Do you want to add anything to that, Clayten?
Well, you know how life goes, Sandy. You sort of have a plan, and then there's your plan, and then there's what happens. And what's that old saying? Life is what happens while you're planning something else. Jeff and I had met in the context of business as a spiritual path. we'd done some work together in that kind of thought sphere, if you will. And our evolution, if you want to call it that, has just been on the same path, but just a different expression. And for me, I just thought I could do more good with this technology than I could with anything else that I'd seen in the world, with my background, skills, and experience. And so that's the Coles Notes version, anyway.
So you've both been exploring consciousness fields around the world and tracking the consciousness of humanity for several years now. How are you tracking that?
Well, we use kinesiology or muscle testing, and we do that in a team of people so that we can check each other's results. So we're following Dr. David Hawkins, Power versus Force author, and Clayten had done a tremendous amount of work to kind of back engineer his protocols and have a repeatable, accurate process for kinesiology testing of consciousness levels.
So, Clayton, when we spoke in 2018, you said that the average level of consciousness in homes in North America over the previous year to that was 420 on the Hawkins map, and that approximately 5 out of 1,000 people in the world at that time were at the average level of consciousness of 540 or higher. What changes have you seen since then?
Well, you have a good memory or good notes. Well, I think it's pretty obvious that the world is not the place it was in 2019 or 2018. In fact, the fall of 2019 was the highest consciousness average for the planet in history of the planet. Now, there's always been these high places that we've heard of, maybe places like Atlantis or Lemuria, where societies were very advanced, and that's different than the whole planet, right? So that was a planetary calibration. And there are those places on the planet like the Chartres Cathedral and some of the pilgrimage sites that Jeff mentioned that are extraordinarily high, up on the Hawkins map, up in the 600s or 700s. And the world since 2018 and 2019 has gone down. It's so there's something called the level of consciousness, which is the average beingness, if you will. And then there's something called the integrated level of consciousness, which maybe we didn't talk about. And the integrated level is the level that the world or a person or a place does not go below 98% of the time. So it's kind of your bottom. It's like that trampoline, right? So the integrated level is about 150. We're kind of stuck in anger right now. The overall level of consciousness is in the 190s on the Hawkins map, and 200 is integrity. So as a planet, in some ways, we're not doing well. And in other ways, of course, we have a lot of people that are doubling down on their devotion because of the challenges in the world. So, we can find hope and inspiration in that.
Do you find that difficult to swallow? Because, I mean, your whole intention is to raise the consciousness of humanity. And we tend to think that bit by bit by bit, we are doing that. We have been doing that. But to watch it dive must be quite painful.
Yeah, it can be painful, and it's interesting to look at a chart, to look at the levels over time, and to see, even in one incident cause a large drop, such as the Ukraine war, or even in the U.S. the Capitol intrusion. There was just a large drop in consciousness because of the media coverage, the internet, instant access to knowledge, or the spin on something happening. So you can see those results happen, and yeah, they're disconcerting. And I I believe in the resilience of humanity to overcome and transform themselves beyond the anger or dismay or despair or whatever is happening in the moment, because we saw a real bounce back from COVID, from the initial COVID. You know, the US and other countries were working their way back up the scale. So we really saw that we have the capability to recover, and these things are happening, and I believe that we'll be going back up.
Well, it's interesting because while we're seeing a lot of things go very wrong in our eyes, we're also seeing so many people waking up. People are talking about energy and consciousness in a way they never would have been a few years ago. So, to some extent, what you're doing is working, or what we are doing is working.
Yeah, we're part of a big team of people who hold the possibility for humanity to express the best part of ourselves.
Yeah.
And sometimes these global changes in consciousness, just like our personal consciousness, there's periods where in order to go to the next level of consciousness, so in Hawkins' work, we might say like the world was 240, 242 in the fall of 2019. At every 50-point integer, there's another challenge that we have to transcend to go up above that level of consciousness. Now, whether or not you believe in Hawkins' work or the map, it's not as important as rising or raising our level of consciousness requires us to transcend certain lessons and to embody them. And there is a principle called breakdown, breakthrough in the spiritual development world, the personal development world. And so maybe we're in a breakdown, breakthrough where humanity has to learn a certain lesson so that it can go above the level that it previously had achieved. So that's a little more granular explanation of a hopeful perspective.
Yeah, there's been quite a few people that I've been speaking to, scientists, who are saying exactly that the planet and we are having a near-death experience, and we are going to come out of that, more enlightened. But let's talk about some of the research that you guys have had going on over the last few years, because you've been working with Harvard and Yale trained scientist Dr. Gary Schwartz, who is the author of a book called Extraordinary Claims Require Extraordinary Evidence, among other books. And that's the title I would think that some people would level at you, because, one cannot see what you are doing. One can't see these fields of consciousness. So tell us about the research that Gary Schwartz has been doing.
Yes, Gary came in through a customer who knows him at the University of Arizona, and he observed and worked with the data of previous experiments and helped us design, more recent experiments for about a year. And he was kind of continually surprised by the data, like how good the data was. The statistical significance was very high in the data that he saw. And then after a year, he decided to go on the service and experience it himself. So he's I guess what you would call a healthy skeptic. So he is really looking for the data to show the effect in a very significant way before he's, kind of on board with some of the claims. And yes, we definitely fit into extraordinary claims. And so the research that we're doing is it's following sort of accepted research guidelines. It's at different levels. It starts with a pilot study. Is there an effect? Is something happening? And then you move on to increased rigor, blinded studies, increased number of data points, or N number. So that's what Gary has kind of brought in, is that kind of march into more and more rigor through the experiments. We did a plan experiment. So we've done a series of plan experiments that were increasing rigor, getting to double-blinded studies of a very large farm in Saskatchewan growing organic red wheat. And in that case, there was a 22% increase in yield, more than a 22% increase in yield over the control acres. So in that case, we had large John Deere combines pulling data acre by acre as they harvested, and there were FLFE sections and control sections. The farmer didn't know which was which. The data analysis didn't know which was which. And we saw a very large and a very statistically significant, 22% increase. And that's kind of on top of, 4 different plant growth experiments, 2 of which were blinded. So that's one way to look. Okay, is something happening? There's what we say is a high consciousness field. We say life benefits. That's one of our extraordinary claims. Here we see plants benefiting greatly. In the other blinded experiment, it was a sprouting and root length study, and we had a 167% increase in the length of the root in the FLFE environment. So they're very significant increases in vitality and growth of the plants in the FLFE environment. So that's one.
That's good to have, because people will obviously say that how can you possibly measure? Okay, you can use your kinesiology, but how can you really measure it? Because it's a subjective experience. But when you can actually see that you've increased the yield of something, or you've increased the length of something, that's good stuff.
Yeah. And there's no placebo effect there.
Yeah, exactly. And you've worked with pets, haven't you?
Well, the pets research is more anecdotal at this point. We don't have, verifiable data around pets. We do have quite a bit around EMF, the effect on EMF sensitives of being in the FLFE environment, and then we've done quite a bit of studies on the customers in the FLFE community.
Yeah, evidence is a curious thing, Sandy. It's we send out an email if you go on the free trial that gives you dozens of ways to notice the effect of a high consciousness field. Some people put it on the house, or primarily on a house where they notice it. And we got stories back from people about their plants growing significantly faster, the trees on their property growing significantly faster. We've had pictures of new or relatively new neighborhoods where they're just building a big subdivision and everyone has the same house and the same tree in the same place. So it's a pretty good control. And, their plants or their tree on their lot is 30% larger after a year than the tree next door, and it's much bushier, producing perhaps more fruit, more flowers. So those are the type of things that we hear over time. Some people notice their pets become very calm, their children get along better, their spouse sleeps better. Nobody's told them, there's a health issues that start to diminish. So those are all, as Jeff would say, or said, anecdotal to begin with. And then we look for patterns that we can bring more conventional and some frontier science to the table, because this technology is, in actuality, it's very similar to human prayer. You hold something unique in mind, or a person or a place, and you send a thought or an intention. And I don't think there's been a mother yet who I've talked to that hasn't had an experience where they knew something was going on with their child, right? And we've all had the experience, I think, of thinking of somebody and then they phone us, or we think of someone and then we call them and they, I was just thinking of you. So humans are extraordinarily powerful beings. And perhaps if we didn't have all this wonderful technology, we'd be a little more cognizant of our thoughts and the influence of, intention and things like that.
What's the spillover? I mean, if you are directing this, if you've got a subscriber at a particular location and you're directing it to that location, could it spill over into their neighbor's location as well?
Well, the way it works is it goes to the boundaries of the property. So it's basically the technology is the unique identifier is the address or the coordinates, but it's going to that property boundary based on the records in the country. The address records in the courthouse or wherever they're located. That it's these dimensions is the lot size. So it's going there, and there is some positive effect of like lighting a camera in the dark or lighting a candle in the dark. There's more and more light that's spilling over into the neighbors as well. So people see positive effects at their neighbors, and it's a bit like a blessing, like blessing your neighbors every morning. If you got up and you just like sending them good health and well-being, it's a bit like that. So that's spilling over into the neighbors.
You've also done some studies with IONS, Institute of Noetic Sciences, on cognition as well. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so the IONS experiments are pilot studies. So they were, is there an effect? Small n, small groups of people. One of the IONS experiments was in their discovery lab, and all the subjects had the full EEG, head apparatus, and we were measuring wavelength, brain wavelength, and giving cognitive tests that would test their ability on math problems and other kind of cognitive problems. So the lab assistant we had the ability to turn FLFE on and off in the discovery lab, and so there were subjects there. And what they saw was an increase in a change in the brain waves as well into the alpha state, and an improvement in the cognitive performance on the tests. But again, small sample size, pilot study. What Gary has been really, really great in bringing to us is you don't stake claims on those kind of things. It's an indicator something's happening.
Yeah.
And then you go back, like with the customer, like Clayton said, we get lots of testimonials from customers, lots of anecdotal stories. Then you go back and you create a survey instrument to really test that. You get a large sample size and you see, are people really experiencing these things? Or is it just like one or two people? And that's where you get data then is statistically significant, where you see what's really happened. So yeah, the IONS work was very interesting, and I'd love to follow up on that with more studies.
And you've also done something with Dr. Emoto's lab in Japan?
Yeah, Dr. Emoto's work was a groundbreaker for many people, or a paradigm shift in because of the beauty of the images. It was so startlingly evident, I would say, that thoughts are things, and thoughts affect water in particular. And so we did a study with Emoto as well, and then, as I just said, it's a pilot type study. And Dr. Emoto has all of these standard images, Sandy, like truth and love and beauty and happiness and gratitude, and all these thought forms that they basically took a bottle of water and they put a sticker on it and wrote a word down, and they froze the crystals, of course, and took pictures. And so he has all these standardized thoughts that express in water. So interestingly enough, the FLFE crystalline shape came out partway between truth and love in the standardized Emoto samples. Now, again, is that conventional science or is that frontier science? Well, it's just one more data point, and we're trying to get as many data points as possible to create just the awareness that high consciousness fields are real, and that not only can this technology create them, and humans have been creating them for as long as there's been humans and places of worship.
Mm.
I mean, pilgrimage sites. We had just had some friends that came back from the Camino Trail, and we're thinking of walking that. So we're kind of planning a trip there. And
Me too.
there's, yeah, okay, seems to be a thing. So there's places, I mean, obviously the big cathedrals tend to come to mind. Temples. There's different temples in different cultures for. Particularly in India, they're just known for their sophisticated temples where you go to one place and you pray for a good crop, and you go to another place and you pray to get a good job. You go to another place to pray for fertility, and you go to another place to pray for good health. And so they have all these very sophisticated architectural, mathematical wonders that they've built. And people go there and pray, and they offer the best part of themselves to the energies of that place, and they ask for divine guidance from not only the land, but whatever aspects of the divine they believe in. So this is not a new thing. It's just, it hasn't been perhaps proven in as many ways as we would like to see. And part of it is just, in the West, we're pretty analytical and science-based, and having evidence helps the mind relax.
Yes.
That's the purpose of it. It's just, okay, this is an integrous approach, and maybe some of it's frontier science, but there's so many pieces of data. There's so many levels of information that, as Jeff has said, that, you go from one level of N value to another level of N value. You replicate the study. You go blind. You go double blind. That's the highest, double blind longitudinal study is, from what I understand, is the highest standard of scientific truth you can achieve. So we're just moving towards that all the time, and our hope is that people can they can trust, primarily the fact that humans are extraordinarily creative, resilient beings that create high consciousness fields if we want and we work at it, and our technology does that as well. But part of our mission is to support the evolution of consciousness, and having people understand the power that we have individually and collectively is as important or more important to that mission than having people consider FLFE.
In talking about the pilgrimage sites, you can measure the level of consciousness of those different areas, different places. But what you just said, Clayton, about there's also different purposes or different information in the field of, say, a certain temple for fertility. So there's fertility information in that field or in that consciousness field that's there, the area that's there. So FLFE works in really much the same way, that there is a high consciousness field activated, and there's information in the field for various purposes. And one of those is EMF mitigation, which really means, for those of us that are sensitive to EMFs, which is turning out to be more and more people, it's relief from those symptoms. It's not EMF elimination. There's various ways to try to block EMFs, to filter them, to be free of EMFs. But our belief is that we need the stimulation. We need the evolutionary stimulation at some level that isn't overwhelming to our body, to our system. And so the FLFE environment mitigates EMFs, not 100%, but at a level where in the studies that we've conducted, we've seen in the first study we did, 100% of the participants, and these are people that we recruited that were EMF sensitive, many of them, kind of self-identified. They'd never heard of FLFE. They'd never heard of this kind of thing. They came in, And 100% of the people had some degree of relief in the first study. And the people that had kind of the worst symptoms had the most relief. And this was decreased feeling of stress. They had more energy, less fatigue, better sleep, decreased brain fog, that was a big one, and decreased anxiety. Then we had, from there, a replication study that was a much larger N of 40, and it confirmed much of the same results that we had in that study, which is what was our fourth study. We have 5 EMF studies at this point.
Okay, I think we're
Om Times TV. Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. Om Times Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, Om Times offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an Om Times magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on Om Times TV and broadcasting it across the extensive Om Times radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. Om Times. Open yourself to the possibilities.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of Om Times' flagship radio show, What Is Going On? And as an author, editor, and 13 times book judge who's read thousands of books and interviewed hundreds of authors, I'm constantly asked what's really worth reading and what's not. So I created the No BS Spiritual Book Club to help you save time and money by picking the brains of discerning names who've walked this path before you. There's no catch, no fees, and no BS. Just an ever-growing library of 10 best spiritual book lists from some of your favourite authors and teachers, plus free book excerpts, audios and video interviews with people like Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., David G., Lee Harris, Mark Nepo and more. From well-known classics to hidden gems you've never heard of, it's the only no BS guide to the best spiritual books to enlighten your journey of self-discovery. So why not join the club? Get inspired and save money at the nobsspiritualbookclub.com.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Yeah, as we said, the FLFE high consciousness field has information in the field for various purposes. And one of those is EMF mitigation, as we've been saying. One of the things that came up on the latest EMF research that was really surprising to me was depression. So we had 5 points of the biggest positive effect that these EMF sensitives felt while they were in the FLFE environment. It was like, insomnia, anxiety, brain fog, but depression was one of those. And we had a couple of stories. We had a couple of people who had sort of extraordinary experiences. One woman from Madrid, Spain, who had been in a 2-year difficult time with relatives passing over, her husband getting cancer, and she had fallen into a depressive state. She had a lot of anxiety, a lot of negative thoughts circulating all the time. And she's a PhD in psychology. She's very well resourced, and she couldn't get herself out. Well, she went on the FLFE free trial, and she came out of that state and was able to manage herself much more effectively. So that's an interesting area. We haven't done, definitive research on that yet. These are anecdotal stories at this point, but I thought it was really interesting that showed up.
Yeah, it's interesting, Jeff, how this research evolves, and it basically comes out of customer stories and the data we get from our own research. It's kind of a combination. So one of the examples of that is how we discovered that EMFs were influencing the FLFE environment. And so every week we test the level of consciousness of the properties to make sure they're at the level that we promise. So just as we talked earlier, Sandy, about the level of consciousness and the integrated level of consciousness, for the mobile service, it's a little bit different than the home service. So we have two services. One can go around an object like your phone or a pendant or necklace, and the others are on properties. So we have home and business and nonprofit organizations and things like that. So when we were testing the properties on Saturday, we were starting to have properties to drop below the promised level of consciousness. So the default level of consciousness for the FLFE service now is 550 out of 1,000 on the Hawkins scale. And that's the range of unconditional love. And according to our research, that's the best place to start the service. If you do a free trial, there's a control panel that you will get access to, and you'll be able to log into that and adjust the level of consciousness on your property. We have something called a consciousness slider. So you can slide the consciousness up and you can slide the consciousness down. So, you can be your own consciousness researcher. We give you like as many tools as we can right now. We have more coming. And you can even turn the EMF mitigation on and off. And for those of us who are EMF sensitives, we have different ways of relating to that. But I'll just finish up this story quick. So we were testing the level of consciousness of properties, and some were dropping. So we would call the customer, and they started telling us stories. Well, there's a new cell tower went up across the street. Oh, I put in a new super high gaming router because my son's like a gamer. Or there's a smart meter on the side of the building that they put smart meters in. And the extra influence of that electromagnetic field started to cause the level of consciousness of the properties to drop. So then, as we talked earlier, we were trying to find a way to really optimize the experience of supporting the evolution of consciousness, because things like colds and EMFs and flus and little things, they kind of make us stronger if we have them in the right amounts. I mean, I believe that getting a flu once a year I'm not looking forward to it, but it does strengthen our immune system, right? And in the world of EMFs, or in this world, I guess the world of EMFs, we're not going to stop this technology, right? There's going to be more and more technology as time goes on. So let's find a way to support ourselves to have it be an optimal stimulus for evolution. So it's a bit of a different perspective. So we had to do research on finding out what would optimize EMFs. And what we found is shungite was the only material that could do that. And so we found a way to put the energetic signature of shungite. We found that the properties started going up. We do it two ways. We put the energetic signature of shungite in the environment on all of the consciousness lowering EMF emitters. So we look at consciousness from a point of, we look at EMFs from a point of consciousness from the point of EMFs to a degree, but more about how consciousness is affected by EMFs, because that's where we feel we have expertise and data and resources. So as soon as we did that, or after the experiments and after the research, and we found a way to do it, the level of consciousness of the properties actually went up after not only the the energetic signature of shungite was added, and we also raised the level of consciousness of the consciousness lowering emitters. So the routers, the smart meters, the cell towers were consciousness lowering EMF emitters. Some of the smart fridges, especially the new LED lights, the ones that are squirrely or twirly. I don't know what the technical name is for it. I can't remember. So all of those now are raised in consciousness to the degree that they will emit positive consciousness raising energy, the same as your cell phone if you're on the FLFE service. And if you're on the service at home, all the energies coming in will be harmonized as well.
So what I want to know is, obviously I disappeared, my computer, everything went, my connection. There was no outage to my house. Everything was still on. It's just my computer was not connecting. Did you turn on the activation at that point, and did it blow me off?
No, I didn't turn it on at that point. You,
You
Clayton?
didn't.
I turned it on 20 minutes ago.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe it was a
Yeah.
collection of energy that was just too much for my computer to take. I mean,
be.
yeah. So, obviously, I've missed a huge chunk of what you've said, so I've got no idea what you've been talking about. So forgive me if I ask questions that you've already answered. But there's something I'm curious about, and that is 5 years ago when we did that previous show, I asked if you foresaw a time when cell phones and mobile devices would become health aids. At that point in time, that was so far out of our thought processes there, but clearly that's exactly what we've got now. Do you have any inclination of how far a phone or a watch could evolve to become more of a health aid, and maybe to even carry some of your activations in the future?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we understand in science, even conventional science, that there are beneficial emissions. There's heat and light, and there's positive EMFs that are good for us. There's the Schumann resonance from the earth. There's the wagging of our dog's tail. The emissions of those positive energies can benefit us. And so I can envision a device, a watch, a cell phone that would be positive, emitting positive. It would have a special antenna for the positive emissions of the right frequencies or the right EMFs that are good for us. I mean, it's not happening now, but it very well could. What we're doing is we're activating a field that includes the phone, and it's around the phone. There's like a 9-foot radius bubble where the consciousness is the highest and the information is there to help us with EMF mitigation. And then there's a much larger field that's 300-foot radius around it that's positive for people around us. But yeah, with research on what's beneficial for humans, then enhance the immune system, healing, but particularly our psychology, staying positive, forgiving ourselves and others, having that around us all the time, we see as beneficial.
I mean, you've engaged, and you may have already spoken about this, but in a large project to raise the level of consciousness in trauma hit areas. And you are, when crises happen around the world, both natural like earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, and man-made like the wars. You mentioned Ukraine. We've just had this crisis in Israel and Gaza. Do you automatically, when these things, kick off, do you automatically include those locations in your own, transmissions, if you like?
Well, there's a principle in spirituality called the law of non-interference. And it alludes to the fact that we can support people and situations to a degree And there is a line where we're starting to interfere with other people's free will. So we do provide support. In fact, 95% of the energy of the machine, probably right now, and the FLFE system is a machine. It's a series of machines and other technologies that create this high consciousness field. So we do a lot of service work. Sometimes it's as high as 98% of the energy that the machine is sending out is used in service work. And we do, stay on the side of providing loving support where we can and recognizing the law of non-interference. So there is a line there that we have to be aware of, and we do a lot of service work.
Mm. Do you ever measure the levels of consciousness at places like I've just discussed, just mentioned, at times like that, to, calibrate the level of consciousness there at that point in time?
Yes, we do. That's really the first step, is looking at what is the situation. And, we use the tools that we have. I mean, we certainly have the media and information that we can glean elsewhere, but we will measure the level of consciousness, in a particular area. And when you said, do we automatically put on these areas? We would consider, so it would be a discussion, kinesiology testing, what's the best way to support this area, this particular area, what's going on there. So you could look at the level of consciousness. It may be, in an area like Ukraine, down in like 50 on the Hawkins map, like in despair, like in the area of fear and despair. As things start to kind of come up the scale, you get into anger, at 150. So that might be a different support than what's happening at despair, where there's really no hope. There's no feeling of the future. So that would be such a hard place to live and a hard place to be. And those are the areas we like to help if we can.
Yeah. Did you tell, in my absence, did you tell everybody about what would happen when they sign up for their free trial?
No, we didn't.
Oh, well, please tell us.
I'll start and hand it to you, Clayton. Well, the free trial is free. There's no credit card. From the very beginning, we said we don't want people to be accidentally billed. We don't want to pressure them to subscribe. The free trial is a gift. And literally in a minute, you could have your phone or your home on the FLFE free trial, and you can experience the energy. So you would go to flfe.net, go to the free trial button, and you would have a choice of a home or a phone. And each one is 4 weeks. I'm sorry, 2 weeks. Each one is 2 weeks. You can do 2 free trials, one for the phone and one for the home, for a total of 4 weeks or a month. So that's the gift from us to everyone, is to, because of the nature, the nonlinear, the frontier science nature of this, the best way is to try it for yourself. And if the free trial is something you like and you experience positive change, then you could join, but it's not automatic. You have to actually work at it. You have to, want to, and find the link and subscribe. So we make it that way on purpose, so that you get to experiment without any risk and try it out.
Well, I mean, I think it would be a wonderful thing to be able to switch it on if you've got, some maybe children who don't get on well in the house, and just sit and observe what happens. I mean, it's free. It's an easy thing to do. And, the proof of the pudding is right there.
Yeah, it's good to. A lot of people don't tell others that it's on, because they do want to have that somewhat experimental thing, in their own life, and they get to be their own consciousness researcher again, because it is I mean, it's not quite a double-blind study. And it's interesting to observe conditions change when other people don't necessarily know what's going on.
Yeah.
We do ask that someone on the property know the service is on. Like there's one you can give that's not as high consciousness. It's called Smarter EMF. It's at like the 500 level on the Hawkins scale. The service in general on the home is 550 as a default. And the reason that we want people to have somebody on the property that knows the service is on at the higher levels is because there's an increased requirement for hydration. So when you're in a high consciousness field, the body's innate intelligence uses that energy to do the things that the body knows how to do, which is heal itself. And in order for that to be optimal, the body requires, a certain amount of water. Of course, it requires a lot of water anyway, and probably 80% of us are dehydrated. And for you to have the best experience, you do need to have an adequate amount of water.
Now, you believe very much in the power of business as a spiritual practice. I know that your own business is founded on those principles. Have you seen an increase in the numbers of businesses that are applying FLFE over the past 5 years?
Well, we're certainly seeing businesses come on a regular basis. During the pandemic, what we saw more so was home businesses or people working from home. Doing as we know, they didn't have that choice to go in, so we saw kind of a shift to a home-based business and more of those happening. And we do have those stories from customers about what happens in their business. More in the more retail space, people tend to stay longer. They come into the store and it feels good, so they shop longer. Or they're there longer. Maybe they, go to the bathroom and keep going. Keep shopping rather than leaving. So that could be a benefit. And what I saw in my businesses was coordination and kind of cooperation, like really positive relationships between people, less infighting, less gossip, and more like, let's get it done. People kind of jumping together into groups informally and taking care of problems more so than happened before.
What are the most common things that people report to you that they notice?
Well, and I'll hand this off to Jeff in a minute because he's a little more familiar with this. But in the general service, the number 1 and 2 things are the ability to change a negative thought from a positive thought. To change a negative thought to a positive thought, and the ability to forgive self and others.
Yeah. What would you say is the most interesting piece of feedback you've ever had?
Well, one feedback that happens very often is teenagers cleaning. we were
That's a good one.
You've got older mums right there.
Oh yeah, we were on with the customer, and it was a group. There was a lot of people living in this living space, and some younger people, including teenagers. And during the call, the guy looks over, as I remember, like, John is vacuuming the couch. This teenager. This has never happened before. So we'd really see that and hear about it on a frequent basis.
Yeah.
There's something about a high consciousness space that has you want to take care of it, and for that to show up in teenagers and young people, that's like a bit of a miracle.
Well, that's quite a convincer right there, isn't it? So we don't have an awful lot of time left. Tell us very, very quickly about your podcast.
Well, Jeff and I, we like to talk about different ways we can raise consciousness. I mean, yes, we have a service and it's beneficial, and we have lots of data to prove that. And high consciousness fields is an area that or a topic that is in some ways the most common thing you can imagine. If you're in a loving place, you're in a high consciousness field. If you're at grandmother's house on Thanksgiving Day and everybody's getting along, or mom's house, or even at your own place, you're creating a high consciousness field. So we decided to create a podcast to, expand the conversation around that in the world. It's called Fields of Consciousness. And we take different topics and we kind of extrapolate on them. We bring in and oftentimes measurements from, using the kinesiology and process and the map of consciousness, and tell stories about fields of consciousness that are kind of everyday stories that relate to current events or things like the holiday season, what happens during the holiday season, what are the levels and why that is.
And really the importance of consciousness fields around us and thought forms around us all the time as we walk around the world that we may think are our own thoughts. Like we have a story from customers. They were hiking and they came out of the woods on a road, had never been there before, and they were behind a billboard. And they both started talking about French fries, like, oh, I want French fries. Let's go get French fries. And they walk around the side of the billboard, and it's a French fry billboard. So there was a thought form of French fries there.
I'm going to have to stop you right there because we are literally seconds away from the end of the show. I'm so sorry that we didn't have a complete show. We'll have to arrange another conversation. But thank you both very much for joining us again and telling us of all the latest updates.
Nice to see you, Sandy.
You too. For more information about Focus Life Force Energy and to register for your 15-day, no obligation, no credit card free trial, visit flfe.net. And if you did notice a change in the energy when the transmission was switched on, do let us know. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, you can leave a comment there for us. Thanks. That's it for this week. I'm Sandy Sedgbeer. I'll be back at the same time next week with another edition of What is Going On. Till then, goodbye from me, and thank you to Clayton and to Jeff.